this is open for discussion, and we are collecting questions again. Yes, first question, and maybe is there another hand up? Second, yes. Okay. Third one, and third one there. Okay, please.
Thank you for both the presentations. We can move where my ED hat. I'd like to write.
Please put your press your microphone button. Right.
Middle one.
Yeah.
It's not working.
Can
be stored forever.
Not forever. I think 1-2 years.
Seems to be off.
1
So,
year, I think
okay.
is good.
Just speak loud, yeah.
Saying that.
Okay.
Okay. My question for both the presenter here. When I plot total consumption both I'm talking only rice here, both India and China, per capita rice utilization, I would say. Then I plot against those per capita rice consumption coming out of household survey, your national sample survey or the household survey data there. The spread between per capita utilizations and per capita consumption coming from the household survey been increasing over time. If you look at in 80s, it used to be very, very minimum. The difference between per capita utilizations and per capita consumption coming. I was just looking at Chinese data right now, based on household survey, per capita rice consumption is 65 kilogram. But if you take the total consumption divided by population, I know the seed, other utilization there, feed, industrial use, the spread is right now 35 kilograms. Your per capita utilization is around 95 kilograms there. Same thing in India, the spread is not as much as in China, but it's close to 15 kilogram now. It used to be very minimal there. What accounts for those rising spread between utilization and the home consumption? Is that we are not capturing home away consumption or processed product or the problem in the data?
Or stop.
Okay, then we have next, I think Dr. Chen. Yeah.
My question is really for Junfei, and you mentioned this big gap between the per capita food consumption, particularly you use the pork, and the per capita pork production consumptions, the gap there. And I'm curious what percentage you think the dining out account for that particular gap, and what's the percentage whether the processed meat may account that particular gap as well. And the India data looks like I have both data at aggregate level, so it may be interesting if we know the percentage-wise for the the gap between at-home consumption and plus the dining away consumption plus process the food items.
Okay, and then we have Professor Charadom from the journal.
I like both paper, very interesting. And it's good for the late afternoon because it keeps me awake. Wow, I like the study about the demand and supply gap, but maybe you can include one part of the extended version that is about the logistic system, in particular the storage technology and also the transportation, because these two would help in terms of saving the food for the future.
Okay. Junfei, you want to next round? Junfei, you want to answer first?
Let's go to the first question. Is about the gaps between rice utilization and per capita rice consumption. In China, I think the region we have, one of the regions has this significant gap is, I think, rice is mostly consumed in south of China, but rice is also used as animal feed in south of China. So I think, the big gap partially is came from this region. Probably have other regions which I could not get in mind right now. And the second goes to Kevin, and you said the gap. Your question is about the dining out contributions in the gap, right? And which I don't have the exact number, but focusing on pork, I would say about let me make have this. Because I'm also doing some studies on food waste and in the gap, and there's three major explanations. One is the missing dining out. The second is came from the food waste, which including the third question, which come from the logistic and the supply chain. And for pork, it's could let me think. I would say dining out contribute more than half of the gap. For pork, and overall, I could not give you a number at this moment, but for pork, at least 0.5% of the gap came from the missing dining out. About logistic losing, yes, and it is the case in China. It was actually used to be the big cases in China for the logistic, for the less developed logistic, which caused a lot of food waste, created gaps between the production and the consumption. But I think in recent years, the logistic system in China has improved significantly, which I don't think it still has the huge room to handle, to reduce the gap. But of course, this conclusion, this statement varies by commodities, particularly for like fresh vegetable or fruits, which still has the room to reduce the food loss. Yeah, that's what my answer.
Okay, Dr. Joshi. Yep.
So the gap, two things I'll mention here. That one is that the poor people and the people living in rural areas, their consumption for rice is increasing. This is one very interesting observation, and mainly because this public distribution system, and traditionally the rural people and the poor people were consuming more of coarse cereals. So now this is shifting towards mainly towards rice. And the gap what you are referring is we have not got the information on the modern processing of rice. So modern processed food is coming, so that is not being captured, and this is negligible, maybe of 1 or 2%. That gap you may be referring. So that we could not able to capture. NSSO data do not get that kind of information. The second is the home away food. The right data is not available, but we have estimated that it is around 7% of the total expenditure is home away. But this is gradually increasing. In the urban areas, the home away expenditure is increasing in Indian context. The third is on logistics. Yes, the perishable commodities need a lot of logistics, especially to reduce the losses. Reduce not only in terms of quantity, but in terms of value as well as nutrition. So that needs to be, we need more investment in logistics, and only the private sector can fill the gap. More, we need to intensify private sector so that they invest in this area.
Okay, then we go for the second round of question, Dr. Orachon, and we have Carl and we have Chikun.
I have very simple questions. Thank you very much for two interesting papers. We pay much attention to econometrics models, and we talk about constraints on the supply side this morning from the climate change. I just wonder, are there any policy addressing population growth in these two most populated countries?
Okay, next question, Carl.
More is better.
I was going to ask Dr. Joshi, it seemed to be some inconsistencies between what's going on with the increased demand for and increased production of livestock and livestock products, and then which was, I have written down here 80%. I'm not sure what that is of, but and what's going on in the coarse grains, I guess this is where the expansion's very small, or relatively small, 28%, and I guess I presume that part of the issue is that coarse grains include pearl millet and sorghum, which is declining, and you've got maize is presumably increasing rapidly, which then suggests that another iteration of the project might want to, I suppose this is too much work, but anyway, might want to separate out maize from the two other coarse grains, because they're really going in such different directions that aggregate lump is not sure that it really tells you very much.
Okay, then chicken.
First, I would like to share some information on the difference between utilization and consumption on rice wheat. That roughly about 1/3 due to overestimation of production, 1/3 in past few years go to the stock, and then a little more than 1/3, nearly 40% come from Junfei just reported on the food consumption of people home. So, but it needs change over time. If this year government more concerned about grain security, and production will increase, even actual production might follow. So it's very dependent on which year you want to talk. So that's on grain utilization and consumption. On meat, roughly about 20%. My estimate in recent year was overestimated. 10 years ago, overestimation about 40%. So now it's about 20% overestimation. So you see the gap between production utilization and actual consumption. In meat sector, 20% is over reporting, and 80% is come from food consumption away from home. USDA do this adjustment in their own projection. So this is share my information, but a quick two questions, one to each, quick. And Junfei, did you control for price? Because we use same data to analyzing demand for rice when we control for the quantity different. High income consumer expenditure for rice almost similar as low income consumer, but high income consumer much less quantity because they consume high quantity. And same for rice with maize farmers. So when we control for this quantity difference, we see the income inequality decline quite a lot. But if you do not control price, only use expenditure, assume same price, we could overestimating the income elasticity. First question for you, and for Joshi, your rice elasticity income is 0.026, something like that, and you project for 2030. Do you use same income elasticity, or you assume falling income elasticity over time? Because you still project quite increasing in consumption. If you use for declining income elasticity, maybe in the coming year become negative. Thank you.
Okay, so before you answer, there are two comments from Dr. Amar and from Prabhu, and then I will take Peter on, so please take notes and then you may answer.
People always use the feeling that the change in stocks should be in the equation, balancing equation. It's okay if for 1 year, but for many years, you don't do that. Politicians, Thai politicians in particular, are very stupid about this. They always think that when the price falls, you put it in storage. You put it in storage, you support prices. And it'll be gained because by next season, you'll make money on the storage. But of course, by next season...
In China, storage going this.
Yeah,
storage goes.
But you don't do that, right? Because what happens in general is that expected change in stock must be equal to 0. Expected change in stock. Okay? For any given year exposed, it can be positive, negative, whatever. But expected change in stocks must always be 0. You can't have a long-term increase in stocks. Okay? And so change in stock has an explanation for the divergence between demand and supply for a long term. Cannot be non-zero.
Okay, Prabhu, your comment.
I want to come back on Sam's question about the gap between utilization and consumption. I think one thing that has not been mentioned is household surveys also tend to under or overestimate consumption of certain commodities. So there is a paper that Ashok Gulati and I have been writing for the last 2 years. It'll probably come out one day. It's called The Missing Calories in India. And it basically looks at the gap across commodities and shows that for vegetable, horticulture, and other crops, the gap is much greater than for staple grains, because the recall on how much you consumed of staple grains is much more accurate than the recall that you have for, say, tomatoes. It's hard to ask somebody how many tomatoes did you eat last month, but you can ask how much grain. And so that part, so we somehow tend to overestimate our ability to get information through household surveys. So that's part of the gap.
All right, then Peter, I add your question and then give the floor to the two speakers again.
Brief question of clarification to Dr. Joshi. I thought this was a very impressive piece of work. Unfortunately, I got lost on the supply projection part of the story. In particular, what is being assumed on the input side of those supply projections? Are they quantities or prices that are being projected in that table that you showed us? And I think it must be prices because that's where the supply function was estimated. But if so, how do we know that those projections of input prices are mutually consistent across the commodities? That's important because the commodity composition of output is changing, and that will have implications for factor prices. How do we know that those assumptions are mutually consistent?
All right, now, who wants to start? Dr. Joshi?
So there are a few questions. One is on population growth. I don't think that there are any policy measures in Indian context that for controlling population. I think more and more education is being given to the society to control the population because one government was basically fall only because of they tried to control population growth. Then there are issues like course. Yeah, Carl, I agree with you. Maize, we need to separate out the sorghum, permanent, and vis-a-vis maize. Maize is going to basically in poultry industry, is a feed, and also starch industry. So maize is a big chunk. Coarse cereal is declining, and while maize is increasing. I agree with you. Then on supply projections, we tried to estimate the input elasticities, and then we also did scenarios for total factor productivity. 3 scenarios under total factor productivity, and then also we estimated the output elasticity. So using these and having the past historical trends and the input uses, we tried to estimate the growth rates for different inputs. Therefore, that's why I was mentioning that the labor vis-a-vis farm mechanization and then irrigated area and different commodities. So on using these input elasticities, output price elasticities and total factor productivity, we try to estimate the supply for different commodities, especially food grains. For horticultural commodities, it was we were not having elasticities, so we tried to see that how we can reduce the post-harvest losses. So if we manage post-harvest losses, what is going to happen? And if you are not, then what is going to happen to the supply?
Okay, Junfei, yeah.
I think I have 2 questions, but unfortunately I missed the first question. Asking the policy intervention for food consumption? What?
Population,
okay. Yes, China, we have, one couple, one child policy for over 30 years, but this policy changed starting from last year when now we allow to have the second kids. and without any condition. Actually, before that, also some household they are allowed to have the second child, including all the household in families in rural area, and also if the first child is a girl, they are allowed to have the second kids. So it's a kind of different. And starting from last year, and the policy is open to all families which are allowed to have the second kids. And what the impact it will have seems like at this moment the information shows is pretty minor. And the people, young generation, seems like a lot of them have the second children, but overall the percentage is still very low. So the impact on the total population structure could be minor, if any. The second question, I guess, for me, is came from Ji Kun, and he's asking whether we control the price. Yes, in our demand system, we control the price, but not by income group. We control the price, and all the commodity prices are included. And so when we estimate the electricity, we actually technically are able to estimate the electricity for each individual household. So this is why I can report the electricity by income group. So yeah, we did control that. And then you can see after we consider the income, if you focus on the electricity in different income groups, you see the income electricity goes down pretty fast with income increases. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, this brings us to the end of this session. So thank you very much for a really awakening and very good discussion.